Okay, we've done all our prep work with all that blocking in. I'm sorry if you found it tedious, but now we can use it to really express ourselves and control our paint. Let's come and take a look. Okay, my block 1 layer is selected. Now I could flood that with a mid-brown color, which is what I'll be using as the base color. Or I can come to my adjustments, come to hue, saturation and brightness, because I can alter the hue to be whatever I want. I can alter the saturation to be whatever I want, and I can alter the brightness to be whatever I want. And actually, just by wiggling those sliders, I've got pretty close to what I do want. I want this to be a little bit more yellow in color, maybe somewhere around there. Saturation, let's start off with it fairly low saturation like that. And yeah, that'll do for me. I'll come back to my layers panel and then come to layer 4, which, come on, let's be good. I'll name this one to block bib, because of the bib on the chest. And let's come back again to hue, saturation and brightness. I want a fairly similar hue. Well, that's quite nice. I'm always tempted to change my entire plan because I quite like the look of that, but no, come on. There we go. Now that I've made it brighter, it doesn't look as nice, so I will lower the saturation. Let's change the hue around a little bit more. Yeah, that's more what I want. I need more kind of a yellowish color to that. I don't want it completely white. That's going to be a little bit too harsh. Let's get something about, say, let's try around there. Okay, let's start off with the main block for the main fur. And just to recap the problem, I'm in the classic library, I'm in the artistic brush set, and I found a great brush here called Larapuna. Now, if I choose my base color and I want to choose a slightly darker, more saturated version of it, like that, the size 100%, opacity 100% for now, and, well, okay, you can see the problem. It's painting over the edges, so 2-finger tap to undo that. This is where life suddenly gets easier. Tap on my icon and come to Alpha Lock. When I do that, you can see the little thumbnail and the layers panel gets this kind of grey checkered pattern. Whenever you see a grey checkered pattern or a white and grey checkered pattern in any digital art program, that's its way of telling you that the grey checker bits don't have any pixels on there. It is transparent. But for us, this means, oh, look at this. I can put down my brush strokes and the transparent areas on this layer don't get affected. Now for this, I'm making big brush strokes. In general, you work big to small. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm not worrying too much about fine detail, let's put it that way. I'm just slapping the colors down. You will see me using something different in a short while that is going to make you sit up and take notice, I promise. But for now, I just want to put down a general texture. That is a little bit too strong against the slightly lighter brown, so 2-finger tap a few times. And instead of choosing a brighter color, I will lower the opacity down to about halfway, and then when I put down brush strokes, with this particular brush, it's still putting down fairly dark colors like I've got, but it's a bit more scratchy, the texture. There's a little bit more of the original texture left underneath. That's great, that. I can work with that. Maybe make the brush a little bit smaller now that I feel I should do. Now this particular brush, Larapuna, it does something rather interesting. It doesn't just splat down the same color every time. It puts down variations. Like sometimes you'll get a more redder brown, and other times you might get a more yellowy brown. That is because the brush has been set up inside the brush studio, which, if I tap on the Larapuna brush again, there's the brush studio with all of these different tabs and all of these sliders along with the shape of the brush, which you're probably seeing, plus the grain of the brush. And for grain, think the canvas or the paper layer. They are what all go together to make up the effect we're getting. Let's choose a lighter brown, but I want it to be a little bit more yellowish in tonal, maybe a little bit warmer. Let's see what that looks like at the top. Yep, Yeah, I can live with that. You may be looking at this thinking, oh my goodness, what a mess. But trust me, it's going to change. And actually, I like this particular paint texture. It looks nice to me. It looks a bit children's illustration, maybe. But at this point, I should make a point about your style choices. Because if I make this and this layer invisible, we're left with the line drawing. That has a certain style to it. It's not a very simple, smooth line that's the same width going all the way around. A cat, it's got a little bit of style to it. It's got a little bit of roughness, it's got thick and thin. Around the ears, there are some deeper shadow areas. And that is all good if that's your particular style. But as a rule of thumb, if you have an outline like we've got, the more complicated and the more textured the outline is, the simpler the fill areas, which is what we're doing now, should be. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a situation where you've got all this style and character and interest on the outline, which can end up competing with all the style and all the character and all the interest of the fill areas. So please just be aware of that. And I think I'm getting to a stage where I like what I've got. I'm going to rest my finger in various different areas to try and find these mid-brown areas and just try and adapt these borders between the dark and light. And as I'm doing that, I'm starting to get some rather nice reds in there. Yeah, I like that. Let's try sampling some of the deeper areas and bring up some of the shadows around here. So I've got a general form to our cat. A little bit of shading in some of the deeper areas and underneath the tail, but along the side of the tail, maybe that's a bit too much. So let's take a look at that. Oh, and one thing I do want to do as well, I want to do inside the ears. Actually, for the ears, they're going to be kind of a pinkish color. Well, that's what I want. So let's try and find some of the cooler reds. Let's try a pink maybe around there. I don't want it too saturated, so start moving it towards the grays. This is a very common mistake that people make when they're learning with digital. You've got these beautiful, really intense, vibrant pinks on this side of your selection palette. And so the temptation is to grab those, and you can end up with colors that really start to clash with each other because they are just way too intense. So I'm going to knock this back to about, say, there. What I am going to do is just temporarily create a new layer and just draw in just around here, and let's choose some deep for the shadows of the ears there. I'm going to brush smaller. Let's zoom in a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit darker as well. And do a bit around here. Make sure I bury that deeper colour in the bits of the ear that really should be quite dark. Let's choose a much lighter pink just from around the outer areas. This is a cartoon cat, so we don't need to be too careful with it. Then I'll come to my eraser. Sorry, did I just say we don't have to be too careful with it? Well, that's wrong, and sorry about that. We do have to be careful. I want free, slightly splatty brush strokes to create a certain feel, but our choice to do those free, expressive brush strokes and our choice of colour and our choice of what to do, when and where, you do have to think about the choices carefully, because the difference between bad art and good art often is not technique. It's the choices that the artist made. Okay, so I'll come to my eraser. I'm in my Recents tab, and you can see the brushes I've used recently. This makes life so much easier than having to go through all of these different brush categories. I want ink bleed. I want it on 100%, and I'm just going to quickly knock back those pink bits in the areas that I don't want them. This was just a small area, so I didn't want to go for all of the faff. Let's call it that, the faff of setting up a new layer, putting on an alpha lock, drawing in various different blocked in areas. This is just a quick and dirty way of doing it. Let's quickly undo that. And just put this in. If you like, it's a temporary layer. just to do the things I want nice and quickly. And just get rid of all of that stuff. Have I missed anything out? Let's pinch out a little bit. Yeah, that pretty much works. I am just going to come to my smudge tool. Now let's find something which... How about Little Pine as a smudger? Let's see how this works. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Can you see? Yeah, you should be able to see it. Now, is this going to... Yes, it is. I just want to put in a little bit of direction to this. Yes, I want free and easy brush strokes. I'd also like a little bit of form. And if I can get both of those, then I'm doing well. Not too much. Otherwise, I'm going to be mixing up another style. That will do for me for now, I think. And so what I will do, take this off alpha lock, and I'll come to this layer above, and I'm just going to tap and merge down. Now, just while we're here, we do have the block bib as well. Let's alpha lock that. Choose the color that I've used for the basics. Larapuna is selected, but let's try something a little bit darker for certain areas, like underneath the chin. Let's make our brush a bit bigger for the bigger areas. Put in a bit of shading. You can hear me tapping the surface of my iPad rather than doing big brush strokes. And that is because I'm finding I'm getting more of that texture rather than a straight brush stroke which can even out things like that. 2-finger tap to undo that. If I do little tappy brush strokes, I'm getting more of the kind of texture that I'm quite enjoying. And then deciding where to put your shading. Where to maybe put a little bit of deeper shading in there. Like there'll be certain areas like under the chest where you're going to get some deeper colours. Under the chin because the light's not catching it. Let's add a little bit of the original colour back. Let's lower the opacity. So I'm getting a slightly less intense effect because I'm getting some rather strong borders here at the moment. I would like these shaded areas to blend in a little bit with the lighter areas. But again, rather than constantly coming back to my colours, you put down your initial colours, then you start picking colours locally, like you can see me doing. There you go. There's another colour picked up. And that way I can choose colours which, well, they're local, so they blend in with all the colours that are around them. And as I'm doing this, I'm making my brush size smaller and smaller to get some more detail in there. Whoops. I'm doing that thing that you might end up doing yourself, because let's face it, we all tend to do it. There are certain areas I'm concentrating upon and I'm ignoring things like the pores. What I don't want is to come back here afterwards and think, oh, hang on, I'm going to have to come back and figure out how I did the rest of the lighter areas in order to do the pores. So slightly darker again. I think I want it a little bit warmer, a little bit browner for the deeper areas. And I'm still on 50% opacity. Let's just throw in just some straight white in there just to try and get a little bit of highlights, because at the moment it's looking just a tiny bit too flat for me. It's all shade, no light. Another general rule, add your darker bits first, then add your highlights afterwards. And for your highlights, use less highlights than you do shade. That is a very, very broad rule of thumb, but it can be useful sometimes. Otherwise, you can end up with pictures that look a little bit, how shall I describe it, glary. I'm going to try, as an experiment, using a little bit of brown from the other bits of fur, just to see what happens with that. No, I'm not sure that works. So I'll undo that. Maybe something a little bit less saturated. Yeah, I'll give that a try, because at the moment I've got two different areas which aren't living particularly nicely with each other. I'm going to try blending with this brush as well, see how that goes. I'm a bit worried with it that it'll just start to mush everything together into something I don't want. Actually, no, it's not too bad. as long as I don't overdo it, because, yeah, it is starting to get a little bit mushy. I want the texture to definitely be there. But anyway, look, I'm starting to go down the rabbit hole. There is something else I do want to show you, and this you might find quite interesting. Now, I can take these off alpha lock because there's another way of controlling your brush strokes which offers you a bit more flexibility. I've come to block 1. I'll press plus to create a new layer, layer 5, and then I'm going to tap on the layer. Can you see here the little bit I just highlighted called clipping mask? When I tap on that, you're going to see the whole layer 5 jump right a little bit, and you're going to see a little arrow pointing down. That arrow pointing down lets you know that layer 5 is clipped to the block 1 layer. And what that means is I can do any brush stroke I want on layer 5, but you'll only see those brush strokes where there's already paint on block 1, the brown fur layer that we've just been working on. And I'll show you that in action. I've got my La Rapuna brush selected. I will choose a very light color, opacity on full, make it nice and large, and you see that? What a mess. But let me come to our layer 5, and I'm going to turn off clipping mask by clicking on it again and watch what happens. That is the brush stroke I made. And now that layer 5 isn't working as a clipping layer, you see all the brush stroke. Turn on clipping mask again, and you only see the bits on layer 5 where there's something on the layer underneath, the layer it's clipped to. And you can have loads of layers all clipped to our block 1 layer, and you control your brush strokes. I mean, if you look at that brush stroke I just made, you can see it's got a really interesting edge and it's a fast brush stroke, but it's controlled by the layer underneath. Ah, but Simon, I hear you say, why would I bother doing this when you've already showed us alpha lock? Because this actually takes 2 layers. When I alpha locked the block 1 layer, that only took 1 layer, which means I get more layers to play with because of memory constraints and blah, blah, blah. Well, look, let me show you. I'll choose a different color and I'll put down another brush stroke just there. Then I will come to my block 1 layer and let's control recents again. Let's try hard airbrush, and I'm going to paint any color I want on my block 1 layer. Not the layer 5 with those big dashy brush strokes, the block 1 layer. And I'm going to do it. Oh, you know what? With certain settings and certain brushes inside Procreate, you don't see the cursor before you draw, which I need you to see. So come up to our wrench icon, come to where it says Preferences, and then come to Advanced Cursor Settings. There is brush cursor visibility, show while hovering. Yeah, that's great. But at the moment, my brush outline style is set to per brush, which means that all the different brushes have their own particular way of displaying things. That is a waste of time for me. I'm going to come to active color. No, I'll come to high contrast. Now, can you see that? You've got an idea of where I'm going to be doing my brush strokes. Sorry about that. I've got a bright green selected. I am on block 1. Layer 5 is clipped to it, and I'm going to make a brush stroke just at the corner of that layer. Look at that. Everything on layer 5 is affected by the brush strokes on block 1. Anywhere on block 1 which is transparent means the brush strokes above it are hidden. There's nothing stopping me from coming to block 1 and adding brush strokes like I've done, or erasing things. Suppose I come here to my erase tool, I've got ink bleed selected, put the opacity way up, come here, let's make my brush size a bit bigger, and see that? If I erase parts of the layer underneath, the brush strokes on the layer above get hidden. If I do the opposite, if I add, the bits above get made visible again. What that means is, as well as doing all these fine, free brush strokes that you've seen me do on my top layer, I can come in and edit the visible bits as much as I want. You can't do that with alpha lock. Now, just incidentally, you might be confused with this by seeing brush strokes plus the green. If I make the top layer invisible, though, that is what I've done. I just created a green brush stroke. But remember, when a layer is clipped, it doesn't care what colors are underneath it. All it cares is that there are brush strokes there. All right, look, I'm going to 2-finger tap that a few times, get rid of that random brush stroke, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to clear this layer and start again, because now I'm going to show you something else. I'm sorry things are coming thick and fast, but there are so many things to enjoy. I'm on layer 5 and I will tap that little N, which I'm circling now, and when I do, well, you've seen you can control the opacity, but also you have all of these words underneath: shade, color burn, linear burn, darken color, lighten, screen. And by dragging with my pencil or my finger, I'm going to come down to this one, color dodge, and I'm going to choose, I found this nice looking pen. Let's come down to artistic. We were using Larapuna, now we're going to use Aurora, the one at the top. My size to large, my opacity on 100%. I will choose kind of a mid to lightish brown color, which is fairly saturated. Now, watch this. There's my brush, you can see it. I'll make it smaller actually, about there, and that's too intense. Oh my goodness, what is going on? I am putting down brush strokes, and not only am I only getting them where I want them, I'm getting this lighter effect, this lighter brush effect. But instead of just lying on the colours underneath, it's almost like it's playing with the colours underneath. I'm getting a blend of whatever is underneath with a lighter version using this brush. This is because I'm using something called a layer blend mode. Now let's add a little bit more in one or two areas just to strengthen the effect. And then what I'm going to do, let's try coming to our eraser, and I'm going to try using ink bleed because I like the effect of it. It's set maximum size. And now if I come into, say, this area here, I hope you can see my brush. I'm going to erase some of these brush strokes like this, so I get a slightly more pointed effect, because I'm getting cat stripes, but it would be nice to try and control them as well as getting this really quite extraordinary effect. Don't worry, I will explain what's going on. But for now, I just want to just trim one or two of these just to control the effect a little bit more. And in fact, what I will do is I'll choose a different eraser. I'm going to come to airbrushing soft blend because it's got a really soft edge. I'm going to take the opacity down, my size about there, and I'm going to gradually, especially on areas like this underneath the tail, I'm going to make repeated brush strokes and gradually tone down that lighter stripe area just in the shadow areas. I'm just trying to help with the general form of our kitty cat. I'll up the opacity a little bit so I can work a little bit quicker. But by doing this, as well as shaving this effect, I can also come in and tame it and gradually dial down the effect by gradually erasing the brush strokes in certain areas, like here, see, just on the end of the fur. That effect, it looks nice, it looks great, but it's a little bit too strong and it's starting to interfere with the shape of the cat. I'll tone it down a little bit on top of the ears because when I put down those brush strokes, I thought they were a little bit too strong. I'm sorry if my voice sounds really croaky at the moment. That is because the cold has decided to move from my head to my nose and my throat. Okay, so what is actually happening here? Well, if I come to my layers panel, I'm on layer 5 and I tapped where I'm circling where the letters are, and I set the layer to something called color dodge. Now, color dodge, along with all of these other names that you can see here, they are layer blend modes, which sounds fancy, but what it really means is every time you create a new layer, it's set to normal. And you do your paintbrush strokes, and they cover up everything that's underneath them. Or if that paintbrush is partially transparent, then you'll see whatever is underneath, partially. But with layer blend modes, they don't just partially or completely cover up everything that's underneath. They play with the layer underneath. And in the case of color dodge, it provides its own color or brightness, but it makes everything underneath it appear to be brighter. If you look at what we've just done, you've got a combination of these lighter brush strokes, but you can also see lighter versions of whatever I've painted on top of. So the colors play with each other. Putting it very simply, because this is a beginner's set of tutorials, some layer blend modes make everything lighter, some layer blend modes make everything darker. Other layer blend modes make the lighter bits lighter and the darker bits darker. And some blend modes allow you to add color on top of a black and white layer, for example, but you don't affect how dark or light the layer is underneath. You only add color, and that's how they colorize photos. For the lighter and darker and contrasty blend modes, there's different ways of doing things, like with color dodge. If I was to move to screen, you can see everything's getting lighter, but in a different way, and it's more subtle. And screen blend mode is often used when you want to create naturally lighter effects. Color dodge, though, is much more colorful, and this is a cartoon, so that's why I used that. Add, again, does something different, but add tends to be a very strong, very bold effect. And so that's what's happening with this. And also bear in mind, as well as having these different ways of making things lighter, you can control how much by using the opacity slider. So there's our kitty with none of the effect, and I can dial in by sliding the opacity slider. And I kind of like that around about 85, 86%. Well, that's pots of fun. Let's do that again. Add another layer. Tap on it. Come to clipping mask. So you see you can have more than one layer clipped to our block one layer. But this one, I'll tap where it says N. And instead of making things lighter, I'm going to make things darker. Color burn. This is the opposite of color dodge, which is the one we just used. Our brush is the same brush. The size is pretty similar, but I'm going to use the same color as I used to make the lighter brush strokes. Look at that. It's the same color, but because the layer blend mode is darker, I get darker brush strokes. How's your head? Has it melted yet? Oh, I hope not. But what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to add a general. Oh, no, I don't like that. That's way too red for that. Let's try, instead of color burn, let's try multiply. Yeah, that works. Do you remember 2 minutes ago me saying that you use screen for a natural effect and color dodge for a cartoony effect? Well, with this, color burn is going to give you a very strong cartoony effect, but for the actual shading, I prefer multiply, which gives me a more natural effect. I will lower down the opacity even more, come here, add a little bit of deepness just around here, brush size even smaller, and just add something around here and something around here. Can I add a little bit more into the inner part of the ears? Yes, I can. I think that's working. And what about a little bit around the eyes? Yep, I can live with that. Make it bigger. And yeah, I can deepen the areas, but also, if you notice, I can put down my brush strokes on top of the lighter bits. And it's really helping to give me the idea of the form of the cat, but without destroying the brush strokes that I've already made. And again, with this, if I tap on that M, completely invisible, and just dial in the amount I want. And at this point, this is where you turn around and say, well, how do I know what the right point is? It is a judgment call. Remember, the difference between bad art and good art is the decisions you make. If you're not sure, look, just rock it backwards or forwards like this and gradually slow it down and kind of go nowhere near enough, a little bit too strong, still could do a little bit darker, a little bit less intense, and just gradually slide and rock the position that you want, like that. Now, come on, I've got to do that with the bib as well, haven't I? So, once more, add a new layer. And for this, clipping mask and set it to multiply. Let's choose a color which is already there and just make things darker like this. Then I'm going to come to my eraser, soft blend is chosen, set to about mid-transparency, and I'm going to gradually dial back some of these marks I just made. And as before, over the effect is gone, dial in the amount I want. And I think for me, around about halfway. That will do for me for the basic painting of the body. I'm looking at it now and thinking, well, I'd love to do this or I'd love to do that. But the whole point of these tutorials is to explain the techniques and the workflow. Okay, we will carry on in the next video. I will see you there.